Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast today. I'm lucky enough to be joined by Knicks Film School's Benjy Ritholtz to answer 5 burning questions that will define Knicks-Sixers.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. If you want to stay locked into Locked On Knicks the entire playoffs, be sure to subscribe and hit that notifications bell on YouTube to ensure you never miss an episode over there. And then please hit the auto download function on the audio side of things if you never want to miss an episode on the go. But who's talking to you? I'm Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. And today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Benjy Ritholtz. Maybe when it's all said and done, I hesitate to pick favorites because I love so many people in this space, but maybe, just maybe, my favorite Knicks analyst. I don't know if there's anyone smarter about the game covering this Knicks team. It's always a pleasure to be joined by him, and I think you will learn a thing or two as we go through 5 burning questions on Knicks-Sixers. I won't delay the inevitable any longer. Let's get into it right now with Benjy Ritholtz. All right, guys, as promised, we were just catching up for the first time since the preseason. No regular season for this guy. He's above it. Benjy Ritholtz back on Locked On Knicks. No, he's not. He's very kind to join us. Thank you so much for joining us. We're gonna do 5 burning questions on Knicks-Sixers. How's it going, man? How you feeling about the series?
Feeling excited. I'm really excited about the series. I think it's going to be a really good series. It's an interesting series. We'll dig in, but playoff basketball is different. It's fun. It's intense. So I'm excited to get going.
I don't know if you'd agree with this, but I was so excited to get the Sixers over the Heat, and obviously with the news that Jimmy Butler's out, the Heat might have been maybe you could take Might off. It probably would have been the easier opponent, and I still feel more excited about the Sixers. And maybe that was just a little bit dreading that even if the Knicks won, like 3 guys would just be limping by the end of the series against the Heat. But I also think it's the newness. Like, something about these matchups is always fun. Maybe it's the Amtrak rivalry, but I'm really looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's something really exciting. I mean, the Heat series last year was such a grind and a war of attrition. And there was something daunting about that. And not that this Sixers series won't be or shouldn't be, but like, there's a freshness to it. Embiid is obviously like a superstar. So there's a certain limelight on the series that I don't think was there with the Heat. I think the Knicks are in a very different place now. And like, there's definitely, and like, they haven't played the Sixers in a playoff series since 1989. So like, that's really cool. Like, these are 2 teams that are neighbors essentially, and they haven't gone at it in this way in whatever 30 years. So I think that's really cool.
I think it's an aesthetically pleasing jersey matchup too. I don't know why.
Also true. 2 classic franchises.
Yeah,
no, for sure. There's definitely something to it, and the fan bases are both nuts, and it's. I mean, like, Sixers fans were booing last night, like in the middle of the game, like in a 4-point game, like loud booing their team. That was wild.
It's great. Yeah. All right. So I think we're on the same page. We're both super excited. 40%, 2 out of 5 of my big questions are devoted to that man, Joel Embiid, because it's easy to forget because he just came back. Obviously did not look like the same guy last night, but we're talking about someone who was literally putting up over a point per minute when he was healthy in the earlier part of the season. Like, probably the best, again, on a per minute basis, best scoring season outside of Wilt Chamberlain's 50 per game. So I think given that, even if we only see a 70% version of that guy, the first big question is, how do the Knicks guard Joel Embiid? We saw in the one game, the Knicks got to go against him. Embiid put up big numbers. The Knicks still blew them out, and they had a lot of success, like with Isaiah Hartenstein, and even Hartenstein like battling him one-on-one, and Hartenstein showing like pretty just astounding physical strength, able to take Embiid into his body on drives. Like, the Knicks multiple times had great moments of help where Embiid would be held up for a moment by Hartenstein, and on one play Randall would fly into block, and another play Grimes flew in and got a block. What's your initial impression of that? And the obvious caveat here is, like, is it the version of Joel Embiid we saw against the Heat? Is it the version of Joel Embiid we got earlier this season? Is it the probable truth that'll be somewhere in between those two? But what's your initial impression how the Knicks tackled that?
Yeah, what's fascinating about that game is, if you recall, prior to the first, I mean, literally they came down the floor and he stepped on Isaiah Hartenstein's foot on the first play.
Mm-hmm.
And, Embiid, it's always a little bit hard to know because, great as he is, he also, let's just say, shows his injuries. Like, it's very obvious when he gets hurt and he doesn't try to hide it. So whether he was really hurt that game or not, maybe he wasn't quite at 100%. And maybe that's kind of the version that we'll see. Something similar to what we saw in that game. Based on what we saw in that Miami game, I think it's very fair to say you will not be seeing peak Joel Embiid in this series. I think that's unlikely. And because of that, and because of what you said in terms of the success they had trying to stay relatively 1v1 in that matchup without totally bending the floor to his will, I think he's got to prove that he can dominate that matchup before we start sending a ton of help. Now, that requires Isaiah Hartenstein to obviously be on his game. It also requires Isaiah Hartenstein to be extremely disciplined with his hands up because, as we know, there's nobody in the league playing today better at getting guys in foul trouble than Joel Embiid. And the Knicks cannot afford, even with Mitch back, with Precious as kind of a wild card at the center position, cannot afford Isaiah Hartenstein to be limited in minutes because of fouls. So there's a risk, right, in allowing Hartenstein to play a one-on-one. But I think that's what Embiid has to prove he's healthy enough to really expose him in that matchup before we start changing that, before we start going to a plan B. I think you have to mix in coverages against a guy like this, even at whatever level of health he's at. To me, what you don't want to do and what the Heat did late in that game is give obvious help, where one pass away is open for shooters because or cutters like Oubre on that last play. You want to really blitz him when he becomes turnover prone. He's gotten so much better at reading the floor from that high post area. When he puts the ball down, when he's mid spin, that's when you send the help aggressively at him. And the Knicks did a really good job, to your point, in that first game of doing that and mixing that in and causing some turnovers because you can. And if you get him to turn the ball over, he's not getting back on defense. Now you're in transition offense. So very important to mix in those quick doubles. OG is an expert at it. The Knicks as a whole are one of the best teams at digging on the ball in the league. They are excellent at it. Hart's excellent at it. Devo's excellent at it. Anunoby's excellent at it. All three of those guys. So you should be able to generate some turnovers there by mixing up where and when you come. I just wouldn't come early unless I really have to. Unless Embiid's showing me that there's nothing else we can do, I would not show help early to allow him the easy reads that I thought won the Sixers the game down the stretch against the Heat.
Yeah, I was kind of mystified by Miami doing that just because he wasn't killing you driving to the bat. And you're sending that double, obviously, not to, all right, if he shoots a jumper, we better have two guys jumping at him. Like, no, you're doing that preemptively to stop him from driving to the rim and bullying your guy. And he wasn't doing that. And I think this is it's a series that can highlight the defensive versatility of OG Anunoby in that, like, I think when the Knicks traded for him, most people thought of him as like, all right, we are getting a lockdown one-on-one guy. And you are getting that. You're also getting like maybe the best help defender on the wing in the NBA, or certainly someone in that conversation. And to me, his ability to do that and how the Knicks play the matchup. So like he's not on a Tyrese Maxey maybe as much. And there's someone like a Tobias Harris, especially like I think in the later moments of the game, you're saying if the worst case scenario is Embiid recognizes the double and hits Tobias Harris, and Harris either has to quickly take a shot or like just be savvy enough to make the next pass, like we're okay making that bet as a defense versus Joel Embiid going one-on-one at whoever is in the game. And I think Anunoby's ability to provide like late contests there, and then presumably someone else rotates over for the Knicks and Anunoby can X out to the next guy on the ball. Like, I don't know if even as amazing as he is, and like I think as much as Embiid's health is a question, Anunoby not quite to the same extent, but I didn't really like how he looked in that last regular season game. He seemed super lethargic to me. But if after a week the Knicks get the best version of Anunoby during that, late in games you can really have him fly around, and to me that can change games late. My one other curiosity, unless you have any other thoughts on that, on Embiid, is how do you feel in minutes Mitchell Robinson is going to get against him, just given how Mitch has looked so far? Maybe that's too big. It's not quite at 100% battling, but on paper, physically, like Mitch is about as well equipped now to guard him as he's ever been. All right, guys, we'll be back with Benjy in just a sec to continue discussing how Jalen Brunson can attack Joel Embiid and his deep drops, very, very deep drops on defense. But first, I want to tell you about our buddies over at Monopoly Go. Look, we've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime, and the scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep. Lift your head up and say to yourself, time to get back in the game. Pull off some bank heists and take as much of my friend's money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. You can play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards, make your friends bankrupt, smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball, charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play.
Yeah, I'll answer that, and I have one more thought just on Embiid in general. But I think the same applies to Mitch. I think you challenge Mitch to deal with it, and you see how it goes, right? And actually, Precious Achiuwa in the past years with Toronto has shown the ability to at least give Embiid a little bit of trouble. So if Mitch is not up to the task, and I think it's just a health and conditioning situation, it's hard for a guy his size with his weight, and we've seen it every time Mitch gets hurt. It just takes him a long time to get back into the rhythm of things and back to himself, and he might need the offseason. Like, I'm not particularly confident that Mitch is going to be Mitch in this series of the playoffs in general. If he is, you give him a chance to be, and that's great. And if he's not, Precious is not a bad option to throw in there. And by the way, OG at the 5, not a crazy option either, if you really want to get nuts. But yeah, I think you challenge Mitch to do it as well. With the same, I don't think you have to change your strategy much. That's the beauty of having these two guys at the center position, is you can basically just interchange them, at least on the defensive end. And I think that's valuable. The other thing about stopping Embiid is a big part of stopping Embiid is stopping Maxi and Embiid, right? Because so much of their offense is based in that two-man game. You saw Miami basically play a zone for a half a game, and I think it was mostly designed to take away that pick and roll, right? I mean, it was like, you can't go to your bread and butter if we're sticking in a zone. The Knicks are not going to go into a zone, as we know. So it's a matter of how you guard Maxi is kind of intertwined with how you slow down Joel Embiid, right? And to your point about OG Anunoby, you can take some risks. You can blitz and trap Maxi a little bit if OG is not guarding him, because OG might be coming over from the weak side. And you don't feel terrible about OG coming over from the weak side, then you can recover back to the backside. But now OG's on Embiid, and that's okay, right? And that's okay. So OG does give you that flexibility as a weak side defender. And personally, I'd actually start DiVincenzo on Maxi and allow OG to roam a little bit on either Oubre or Harris. Frankly, I don't care about either one. Oubre shot 31% from 3 this year. Like, seems like a decent shooter, but he actually shot like crap. So I'd challenge him to make some threes. Maybe that's who you stick OG on so he can roam a bit. But I think that's to me, as I've watched the film and broken it down, that's where I would go. I think DiVincenzo did okay enough on Maxi where, like, okay, you can maybe blitz a little bit if you don't feel great about that, and then you have OG coming on the backside.
Yeah, and to your point, there are going to be multiple coverages there, and I think that's just as important on Maxi as it is on Embiid. This is circling back, but to your playmaking point on Embiid, like I look for Brunson to just go for one of those blindside steals, like almost per game. Like, he got one in the first matchup against the Sixers. We obviously saw Jimmy Butler get one last night. Like, Brunson has gotten increasingly good at that this year. Like, he basically put the Suns game away doing that as well. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then Embiid, just to back up your free throw point, did not qualify because he ultimately didn't play enough games this year. Finished the year at 10.2 free throws per game. I was stunned by this. No one else in the NBA was over 7.6. So he's literally in a category to himself. And I know you and DJ were noting this on the Knicks Film School pod the other night. Like, Precious Achiuwa like had done a good job in that matchup, not fouling. So the Knicks certainly have some options there. It's just going to come down to like the peak version of Embiid. Like, almost none of this matters because they're just like, even if the Knicks are as well equipped as pretty much any team in the league to stop him, that means like a pretty efficient 30 points. Like, on like in the best version of him, we've almost never seen the best version of him in the playoffs consistently. This year, unfortunately for Philly, does not seem like the year. So I'm gonna cheat a little here, and I'm gonna combine questions 2 and 3 here because I think they're very much related. How can they take advantage of Joel Embiid on the other end of the floor where he looked like I don't know if you saw Old School back in the day, but it was like after Will Ferrell got shot with the tranquilizer dart. But like for 48 minutes, that was a
scene,
like
man.
maybe Sean
scene.
William Scott's a Heat fan and he was in the crowd and he took him out, but it was like he would play drop and he would be out of the stadium in drop most of the time. So that seems to bode well for Jaylen Brunson. And yet the Sixers, maybe we'll talk about this, maybe because Joel Embiid wasn't out there and they got to play B-Ball Paul, who's a better switch defender. Maybe I don't know, Embiid full throttle. Again, we're not going to see Embiid full throttle. They had a relatively good amount of success slowing down Jalen Brunson. He finished the year against the Sixers, 22 points, 8 assists, 3 rebounds, shot 40% from the field, 30% from 3, 88% from the line. Obviously, that is not ideal efficiency. It's a very small sample size. The 2 games he was cooking, he did not have to take a crazy amount of shots because they were blowouts for the Knicks. So that's an important caveat in there. But the Sixers in the 2 middle games did a really good job turning him into more of a passer than a scorer, while also having a game where he had 7 turnovers, which seems to be the formula that the teams that do the best against Brunson essentially get that done. I'm throwing a lot at you, but basically, like, how do they attack Embiid? And does Embiid being out there actually open up more for Brunson counterintuitively for a guy who's considered a great defender?
Yeah, no, and it is all related. Each game was really unique in this series between these 2 teams, despite them all coming after January 1st. There was different personnel on the floor in basically each one. Or less people on the floor as we went on, basically. In the first game, you had Embiid out there. I thought Brunson got some pretty good looks against Embiid's drop, and that drop, to your point, maybe even worse and less aggressive because of where he's at physically than it was in that game. I didn't think that was a bad game from Brunson. The third game, which was like the neither team could score 80 points game, Brunson that was when you had the Hart and Precious lineup starting with Brunson, where Nick Nurse was being super aggressive, helping off the non-shooters, like brutally aggressive. And I it's hard to even judge Jalen Brunson when that's the scenario. It's like nobody's going to score efficiently when that's the case. I will say that Nick Batum and Kelly Oubre are very much the type of defenders I think have the best success. They're long, they're handsy, they're disciplined. Well, I would say Batum is disciplined. Oubre can lose his mind a little bit, but has been disciplined against Brunson when guarding him. You want length. Guys that Brunson can't quite overpower and then shoot over is the key. And those guys have that. Like they're 2 guys that really have done a really good job on Jalen Brunson. They pressure him very high up on the floor. And I think in the last game the Knicks played the Sixers, they found some success screening super high up, like logo screens that allow Brunson not only to just walk into pull-up threes, which he did in the last game, but also now the big has to come out a little bit. And when that big starts to come out a little bit off balance, that's when Brunson gets to his crossover sweep through game. And that's when he kills you, right? So I think one thing, because of the pressure that those guys put on Brunson, I think it's important to think about high screens. Look out for those kind of logo screens from Hartenstein and Mitch to release Brunson with a head of steam at the big. And I think once you have that, if you can create that separation from those 2 guys guarding him, I think he'll be just fine. Like, I do think there's something to those numbers. Like, I do think the Sixers did a good job on him. I just think there are solutions here. And if Embiid, to your point, is lazy or incapable defensively to be who he can be, I think Brunson will be just fine. Like, I think he's got the solutions. I think the Knicks now have the spacing. Even if Josh Hart is out there, OG is now with him, right? So it's just, and the last game OG was back, even though he had half an arm, made a huge difference to the spacing as opposed to Precious Achiuwa.
Yeah. And I think one thing I'm looking at with the week off, earlier in the season, the Knicks started setting those, like, I feel like maybe I'm misremembering, but the Knicks started experimenting with those high screens once they realized Brunson like now has 28 foot and in range. And there was like a 5-game stretch where Brunson was just bombing away on those. And I think over time, especially after Randall got hurt, there was just a little bit too much of a load on him, and he didn't quite have the legs to consistently take that shot. And I wonder if, especially early in this series, Brunson kind of has that back in his bag, and that's an option if Embiid is playing up a little bit more, but up for him is at like the elbow, and Brunson's saying, you know what, 4 feet beyond the 3-point line, that's a wide open shot for me. Like, I wonder if that's a weapon he can go to. But we've seen the Knicks just in general get much better at finding solutions, especially when Brunson's trapped. Like, I go back to that Kings game where just over and over again, it was Hartenstein and Hart down the stretch, like acting as like the Knicks version of Draymond Green and just diving to the rim. And it just sort of feels like this is it's a really risky move to double Brunson. And it gets that much harder with Anunoby, who's such a vicious cutter and such a vicious finisher off of it. And that feels like a counter. To me, like, I wonder if, like, to your point, like about that game with Precious and Hart, and this again kind of bleeds into my next question. Like, can the Sixers counter some of this by just playing so aggressively off Hart and so disrespectfully off of Josh Hart that like they're still able to find a way to get an extra body in there and figure out solutions to this? All right, guys, we're going to wrap things up with Benjy telling you why Bojan Bogdanovic could be a surprisingly big variable in this series. And finally, how Benjy thinks the point guard duel is going to go down between Tyrese Maxey and Jalen Brunson, why it's a matchup that could define the series. But first, we want to tell you about our good friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. I got to repeat that because it's crazy. That's $150. You didn't hear me wrong. Win or lose, bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockdown and make your first bet an automatic win. Mine is going to be the Knicks -3. They are 3-point favorites in the first game. I am riding with my Knicks at home. Remember, all you have to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockdown. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
I think, I think it's the kind of thing Nick Nurse is going to do that. I mean, He's an aggressive, creative, innovative defensive coach. He is going to give Josh Hart plenty of space. And by the way, a pivot he could make at some point or right away is putting Embiid on Josh Hart, as opposed to and keeping him out of those screening actions and forcing you to screen with Hart. But now you have Isaiah Hartenstein in the dunker spot, and the spacing is not nearly as good. I think that's something you probably will see some of, if not a lot of. And they'll play zone too, by the way, which they did against Miami in spurts. Especially if they're trying to protect Embiid, they'll play zone so he can kind of sit in there. So Nurse is innovative. He's the guy that played like triangle and 2 in a finals game. Like he's crazy. So yeah, he's gonna dare Josh Hart to do some things. The Knicks' solution to that has been to screen with Hart, like that Sacramento game you talked about. But I do think Josh Hart's gonna have to take and make some threes. Like we've been like grimacing for this all year. It's like when you get to that point, when teams are going to get really smart and creative about it. One thing I will say about Josh Hart in the past, I would say 3 weeks, he's gotten better at just, even if he's not going to shoot it, it's an immediate pivot and decision. It's the second you hesitate to shoot and then either do shoot or then do something else, you empower defenses to do exactly what they just did. But if he goes quickly into a dribble handoff or he drives the ball and tries to create a drive and kick situation, you can survive off of that. But I do think he's going to have to take and make a couple threes here and there to keep the defense honest. I think it's always going to be important. And then you have, if it's going terribly and it really is clogging up your offense, does Tibbs have the guts to go to deuce, right? And like, if it's not a Hart series, or if Hart needs to be at 25 minutes instead of 35, you might have to do that if he's not going to shoot or he's not going to be willing.
I go back to, and this I'll just say my fourth question here, because this is pretty much it. Whether a specific player or something broader, what element of the team's regular season success, I can barely say that word, are you most concerned? And that's a Knicks fan for you. Are you most concerned about not translating against the Sixers in the playoffs or in general? And when I say that, I don't know why, but I kind of know why. I think of Dante DiVincenzo and Josh Hart. And I think I'm still a little scarred from the Heat series last year, where it felt like the intensity went up definitively from round 1. You played a savvy team. and Josh Hart, who was so transformative for the Knicks last year. Like the Knicks just felt unbeatable when he was playing well. Jonathan Macri put out a Knicks Film School newsletter talking about basically anytime Hart had a good game this year, the Knicks won, right? Like he's such a bellwether for this team. And I still have a little PTSD of watching him and RJ out there, and Jaylen somehow single-handedly still keep the Knicks in games, even though it was basically like 5-on-1 at times. And I remember the flip side of that the Knicks were basically incredible anytime Quentin Grimes was on the floor, even though he was shooting 28% from three, just to have someone out there who was respected. And that's where Deuce has potentially, though there's questions about if it translates for Deuce as well, with this being like his first meaningful playoff action. But that's kind of the argument to have him on the floor. It's the argument to get Bogey, his health pending, a little bit more minutes. And then Dante, as you did a fabulous job highlighting, breaking down every three made this year on Twitter, great thread. People haven't seen it yet. His lack of playoff success in the past and his lack of really good regular seasons translating is also a little bit in my head, even though it seems like he's ascended to a new level of confidence and a new level as a player. Like I think all of this can be summed up as like Tom Thibodeau teams just playing disproportionately hard in the regular season with an edge. And sometimes when that edge gets matched, they don't quite have the talent to measure up to it. And I'm wondering if you feel the Knicks' raw talent in this series is enough, I guess, is the broadest way to put this, but also feel free to zoom in on any of the specific guys there.
Yeah, it's a concern. Like even the offense is reliant on DiVincenzo's 3-pointers, like to a very significant extent. Like they need him to jack away, like to just shoot the ball, get up 10, get up 12. Like it's all healthy. Like that's what the offense needs. There is no secondary creator on the floor. Their secondary creator is now basically the motion that they run on the second side to try to get Dante DiVincenzo threes. And does he shoot it well enough? Does he maintain that confidence in a playoff setting? I will tell you also, like in the games you watch, Nick Nurse was extremely focused on DiVincenzo, especially in the games where OG didn't play and like they were unhealthy. Like you could tell it was a tremendous priority to take him away. And I imagine he's going to have someone face guarding Dante DiVincenzo throughout. Like he's not going to get easy looks. So if you take that away, and that's probably through playing off a guy like Josh Hart, it might be through playing off a guy like Hartenstein even, and just like daring him to do something offensively. Where does the scoring come from? That's the concern to me. And I actually think they'll hold up defensively. Like I think the OG addition gave them, they have, between OG and Hartenstein, they have two of the best defensive players in the league this year.
Yeah. Like
full stop. Like the defensive floor is extremely high. And like Hart and DiVincenzo were both like grinders on defense and good defenders. And Brunson, obviously, we know what he gives you. And he's even though they will hunt Brunson and they will score buckets off of hunting Brunson. Like that will happen and has happened in the matchups they've played. He's going to do some things to make up for it on the defensive end. So I feel like despite the tremendous talent on Philadelphia's side, the defense will hold up. I am concerned about Nick Nurse game planning, taking away what the Knicks want to do, all that motion that has been really successful for them, to just kind of manufacture looks without that second side creator. If that's taken away, where do we go? And how much can you ask Brunson to do if you don't get DiVincenzo looks from three? That's concerning to me. That's the thing going in that has me questioning myself. I took Knicks in 6. I have zero confidence in that prediction because I never get any of these right when I'm picking for the Knicks. I'm incapable of like objectively choosing these series, but
yeah,
that's the thing that has me concerned is like the offense. It's just the offense.
I guess given that, how much do you think the Knicks will play Bojan? How much can they play Bojan? Because I think it was an encouraging final 6 or 7. Like there were some real moments down the stretch of that Bucks, like the shot he just put in Bobby Portis's eye. Like there are very few shots this year that have gotten me so fired up because it just felt like you were finally getting what you were sold. Like we knew what it was going to be defensively, but I was just surprised, and maybe I shouldn't have been, because it is hard to switch environments like that midseason and switch context and switch like just how important each game was from the Pistons to the Knicks. But it seems like he got it together and he became kind of like that gutsy, fearless scorer we were all looking for. And to me, like if not for the whole series, like there's just going to be a game where you need that. And like, and it kind of goes back to the question of like, all right, everything we said about Brunson, like if he just has an off night, like does this team have another answer? And I look to Bojan because there just isn't really another dude, like unless Anunoby like takes a leap before our eyes, like who's going to be consistently creating their own shot.
I mean, I don't know how much it matters, but probably his best regular season game, certainly his best half, came against the Sixers in the second game the Knicks played against them, where he had 6 for 6 from 3 in the first half. Or maybe
19 points in 12 minutes. Yeah.
No, he was terrific. And look, I hope that translates. I think they will need him in spurts. We haven't talked about the non-Brunson minutes yet, that however many there are, and I think there have to be
7-ish.
I mean, the way he's playing and what they're asking of him to do now offensively, you cannot play him 45 minutes. So I think that's literally physically impossible. So I think you're looking at maybe 8, 9, 10 minutes. They have to survive those minutes, and the Sixers will have Maxi out there during all of those minutes, right? So that's very scary, because you have someone who's an offensive generator on the other side, and you have none. And that's not something that's not a question of translation into the playoffs. That was terrible in the regular season. We're just hoping somehow that it turns around when we get to the playoffs. So you're going to need Bogey in those contexts, number one, to like generate something. And to your point, in the last week or so of 2 weeks of the season, there were some flashes where at least he showed the shot making ability that we were expecting when he got here. I don't think the Sixers are the best team to exploit his defensive shortcomings. That's a good thing. They're not like a mismatch hunting type of team. Maxi will do it here and there, not really his game. And there are guys you can put Bogey on and feel okay about, whether it's honestly Tobias Harris. Like, he's strong enough, Bogey, to kind of hold his own on guys who aren't super quick. It's like any quickness, though, it's over. So like he can guard a Harris. He can certainly guard even a Hield and chase him around. He can probably guard Kyle Lowry. Like, I'm not that worried about him defensively in this series. But he still has to provide the offense to justify a lot of playing time. So I think they will need him in spurts, and he does have a role in this series. And if Josh Hart is getting exposed in a certain way, you're going to need him to be in there making shots. So yeah, I mean, now's your time, Bogey. People know I haven't been the kindest to him since he got here. I am hopeful that this will be a good series for him.
Yeah, I mean, I said since they got him, like I was waiting to some extent until Anunoby came back before passing judgment, because that lets you play him with Brunson a little bit more, just because Anunoby's such an eraser. I'm excited to see it on a big stage. I have a good feeling, maybe this will look really stupid in 48 hours. I have a good feeling like he's gonna have some moments, maybe even in game one. All right, Benji, real quick, because we're running up on time here. I just want to ask you, anything else that fascinates you as a battleground in this series? And I'm sure you have 20 things, but just any one thing that's really pressing in your mind that we didn't get to yet.
We touched on it a little bit, but I think one of the true battlegrounds is going to be point guards hunting each other. And it's not, Maxi, again, doesn't really hunt, like it's not their offense, but they will try to get Jalen Brunson in many actions to make him work defensively and to expose his shortcomings. And then for Brunson, we talked about how Oubre and Batum have given him trouble. Maxi, when Maxi played, which is in 2 of the games Maxi played, like when they could hunt Maxi, he had some success there, right? Like if you can find a small guard for Jalen Brunson to pick on, that's the best thing for the Knicks. Like he destroys anyone who's 6'4" and under. Like he plays like a post player against those guys. So can you screen with Maxi's guy well enough to get him in bad matchups? And how do the Sixers react to that? Is it staying with 2 on the ball? Is it trapping? And then how do the Knicks play off of that? Right. If you're going to create that advantage, you got to take advantage of it. You got to maintain it and then exploit it. So look for that. Look for whoever Maxi's guarding. And I imagine to start, it'll be DiVincenzo. So look for DiVincenzo and Brunson. DiVincenzo's screening game gained a lot of traction over the course of the season. And by the end, I think it was a very strong point for the Knicks. So look for DiVincenzo screening for Brunson. And on the other end, how do the Knicks deal with when Brunson's brought into actions? Are they willing to switch Brunson onto Maxi? It didn't work out when they were in the regular season. He got burned several times. Are you going to keep 2 on the ball? And then again, if you keep 2 on the ball, how do you rotate out of that? Are you able to shut down the advantage it's created? So that's going to be an interesting battleground. I think it's a parallel battleground, so it makes it really stands out as something that's going to play a big part in the series.
Yeah, Maxi scares me and just strikes me as someone who obviously we saw a pretty good playoff run from him a year ago. Like, I don't think he's going to be bothered by MSG. I don't think the lights are going to be too bright for him. Like, I will say
he was terrible in the first half against Miami. Absolutely awful. He made some plays in the second half, got in the paint, but he was bad.
That's fair. That's fair.
You can look. He had some. I don't think he was great against the Knicks in the games he played this year. He had some really good numbers in the second game.
Yeah,
but I thought the Knicks actually did a pretty good job. You got to keep him out of transition like that. You have to. He is devastating if he gets, and he creates transition because he's so much faster than anybody else. You have to be really disciplined, and the Knicks do. They crash offensive glass from everywhere, right? You have to make sure that someone tracks him when you do that. So if Josh Hart's going to come from the wing and Maxi's contesting a shot out there, someone's got to circle back and find Tyrese Maxey. Like, you really have to pay attention to that, because if you start giving him fast break opportunities, and again, talk about discipline, send him to the line, which he's also really good at getting to the line, that's when you start getting in trouble as a defense. You got to keep them in the half court and keep them off the foul line. I think that's going to be key.
Yeah, and I think, just as kind of a broad wrap-up point, like, Philly's guardable if you don't give them the extra stuff. And that's what you're getting out with Embiid, with him, like, especially like when you don't have the best version of Joel Embiid, like, and Nick Batum isn't hitting 6 threes in a night. Like we saw it last night. Like this is a team that's stoppable. And if the Knicks keep it in the hundreds, like, they should be able to find enough points to win on like a night where Maxi just goes crazy like that. Like it's going to be tough to score enough. Benjy Ritholtz, thank you so much for doing this. I think everyone knows you're that old man on Twitter, but before I let you go, I got to do it for you. Where can everyone find all your great work?
Thanks, Gavin. At Ben Ritholtz NBA. If you see it there on the screen, I will be putting out many, many things over the course of the playoffs, and including a preview thread at some point if I can ever finish it before Friday night. So hopefully by tomorrow morning that'll be out. And then after every game, certainly, and sometimes on the Knicks Film School account, I'll put out stuff, and then I'll be on some podcasts throughout the playoffs as well. So keep an eye out for that.
All right. I hope we can get you back. I'm super excited to read all of it, see all of it. Makes us all much smarter, and it's always really entertaining. You always mix some good stuff in that makes it just a little bit more fun. I hope you're happy on Saturday night when you turn into the fourth quarter. I hope we're all happy. We'll have one more preview for you guys with Keith Pompey of Locked On Sixers. But until then, he's Benjy. I'm Gavin. We'll talk to you very, very soon on Locked On Knicks.